It's the beginning of the end of Dragonflight, with its final patch launching this week before we immediately slide over to Mr. Pandaria. Hey, it's Soul, and this is Warcraft Weekly, but okay, not really, because I'm gonna spend a lot of it talking about professions. Still, if you could like this video and subscribe if you're enjoying yourself, I'd very much appreciate it. Also, catch me live on mornings on Twitch for a chat, because hey, that's always fun. Fans have found reasons to start up the faction wars again, yay! Aurelia and Turalyon share a love that's lasted over 1,000 years, but unnatural circumstances literally push them away from each other. In the middle is their son Eretor, who seeks a relationship with his parents but had also already grown up to be his own man. It's a good read as a follow-up from the 1,000 years of war story that was told back in Legion, but what does this have to do with the faction wars? I'm not going to spoil the details, and I'll link the story in the video description, but the story takes place mostly in Silvermoon City, where Eretor lives, and by coincidence, Turalyon and Ilaria are visiting for separate reasons, and they all end up coming together. There's been a bit of an outcry from critics asking aloud, why is Eretor living in Silvermoon? For those who don't know, Eretor was left behind by Turalyon and Ilaria, and he was raised by his aunt Varisa over in, well, basically Alliance territory, and hopefully she'll get a new model someday. The question is whether he should be living around the family who raised him, the land where most of his people live, or does his duty just take him wherever duty takes him? The bigger question, though, is Silvermoon becoming more neutral? Does this story foreshadow the city becoming a hub for all players, both Horde and Alliance, in the upcoming Midnight expansion? We haven't even gone through the motions of the World Soul Saga's first expansion yet, but naturally, we're going to draw like some far-off conclusions, even with the smallest of breadcrumbs. Personally, I think this story is a reflection of the current state of affairs on Azeroth. The Horde and Alliance haven't really been doing much since the end of the Fourth War. I guess the closest big thing would be their partnership as the Dragonscale Expedition, which did not include any military presence at all. I think of kind of real-world politics and think of large countries who consider themselves adversarial, as rivals, but there's no overt hostilities. They may even allow trade and joint operations. Now, as for Silvermoon becoming a hub for everyone in a future expansion, hey, I'm all for it. Like, it can already be considered a neutral city because no one ever goes there. I've mained the Blood Elf since the second day of the Burning Crusade, and I don't feel a sense of ownership like, oh, only the Horde should be allowed in here. Silvermoon has had a long history with the other races before the Horde was a thing, and the way I see this is just new history being written. I've seen suggestions that the city, Silvermoon City, ought to be carved up between like having a Horde and Alliance only section, not unlike Dalaran, and that just doesn't really sit right with me, or at least I don't think it's necessary, but what do you think? One more thing, the Darkheart content this week that's been available depicts Ilaria in her traditional green outfit, and according to the story that we just read, she switches to this new look. Now, some have said that the quest this week was a little bit short, and I do wonder if there's going to be a little bit more to enjoy, like her wardrobe change. I haven't played this myself, but reports are coming in that the Troll and Draenei Heritage Armor quests have been, good. They've been bangers, right up there with the Orc Heritage quest that pulls in a lot of history and nostalgia, pride in the races that we've been representing. In fact, it's causing a little bit of envy, I guess, from folks who experienced their heritage quest lines years ago, and maybe they're jealous that the quality and effort has felt like this night and day experience. It's kind of been a while for me now as a Blood Elf main, but I enjoyed what I got, or at least I have memories of how I felt, and I think they were good. But how about you folks? Was your race given the shaft? Next week is the long-awaited Mist of Pandaria remix. It's happening Thursday at 10 AM in a global launch, so it's all hands on deck. The day before that, you can expect a developer interview where we can ask any of the last lingering questions about how the remix works, or what to expect, and more. And it's being hosted by world-famous YouTuber and streamer me, baby. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you know when that goes live. I'm going to be perfectly honest though, while I have lots of fantastic questions to ask already lined up, I'm always scared that I don't have enough to fill up the half hour or so of time that I have, so I could use your help, your perspectives and your viewpoints. What would you like to know about the remix that we don't know already? I'm going to go through the comments here in a few days and see what I can squeeze in, and then after that, I'll see you in Pandaria for some fun times. Let's move on to the latest alpha build, and skipping over the story spoilers, the impression that I have after completing the campaigns is that we probably want to do a good bit of side questing as we go along, because I'm not so sure we'll hit 80 after even completing the campaign. Now that ain't so bad. I don't think. It gives us a chance to check out more side content and dungeons that might have been missed and delves and more. From the feel of it so far, the final zone campaign is more or less an introduction to the zone content, and it kind of has this Suramar vibe that's very story driven, only this time it's not considered as max level content, or at least maybe. I know I'm being vague here, but what I think they're doing with the leveling campaign is pretty interesting. Another notable highlight are modified achievements that are related to delves. Delver of the Depths is a completion-based achievement. You just gotta do all 12 of the delves. Hey, cool. But there's a progressive achievement that has us do the same thing on higher difficulty levels while retaining these revives. Okay, so that's new. You know, it's not testable right now, but I guess higher difficulty delves are going to track how many times we revive. And I have to admit, this gave me Torghast vibes in not such a great way, and players were not keen on having failure conditions of that mode in Shadowlands. So for something like delves, if we're trying to challenge higher difficulties, but after so many wipes we're forced to restart, I don't think that's going to play off very well. Because this isn't testable, we really shouldn't jump to big conclusions despite what's in front of our face. And according to dev interviews, the highest difficulties for delves are supposed to be for bragging rights, and these achievements might just be that and nothing more. I'm just bringing this up now because, well, now is the best time to bring these things up, start a conversation or a debate, because some folks from different walks might be like, yeah, dude, there should be a bit of friction that lets players know that, hey, you can do better and you can maybe get a thing for it. From other reports, the not-so-secret 13th delve is only unlockable after clearing all the other delves at the highest difficulty. So again, it could be that these achievements are just that, just bragging rights, while the gear itself is still accessible. It can be both, but what's your reaction so far? And now we get to talk about professions. I've been trying to be a champion of making professions easier for players to understand. Even as someone who figured out how it all works, I totally understand where people are coming from when they say that they're confusing or that they're complicated or misleading. In Dragonflight and War Within, I've been cheating. Like, here I am in the alpha months before release, taking time to explore and figure things out, gain proficiency, and then, coming at you like, oh yeah, of course, you can figure this out too. But over the past few weeks, I've dove into professions as they become testable and have been trying to stand in the shoes of someone who would pick this expansion up day one, have little to no experience with the new profession system, and kind of ask myself, can I figure this out? And I do have good news to report that the experience feels better than it has in Dragonflight. Now, y'all might want to sit down and pay attention to the screen this time so you get a full understanding. So I'll bring up an example with blacksmithing. So you want to be a blacksmith and you want to make the best shields. Cool. So in Dragonflight, here's what you do. You get good tools. Okay. Then you want to choose the armor smithing specialization, obviously. Then you want to plug in points until you can spec into large plate armor over there, and then shields, and then basically fill that up with points. But you also want to spec into hammer control, because that gives extra skill points into making all crafts. And you also want to consider poignant plans, because that gives inspiration. It's a critical stat crafting thing that gives you really big bonus to your crafting to hopefully make that shield at a rank 5. But based on your inspiration bonus and the quality of materials provided, maybe you don't need to fully max out points in the armor smithing, like maybe 20 or so points each, but you want to have a high enough base skill too that comes from your blacksmithing level, so hopefully you invested other points into useful crafts that'll get you levels, and pray that there's a good market on your server, because crafting orders are your ticket for points, but as long as you can rank 5 with an inspiration proc, then you're okay. So yeah, it's easy. Now let's take a look at the War Within specializations. Now again, we want to make shields, great. Just like in Dragonflight, we spec into armor smithing, and then large plate armor, and then shields. And that's kind of it. We just keep pumping points into here to raise your proficiency to make better ranked shields, and of course raise your overall blacksmithing level. The story behind all that isn't fully realized yet, so I can't speak to it, but let me illustrate to you why in the War Within professions are in fact far less complicated, but still have a certain depth and learning curve to it. Here you're looking at crafting details to make an epic shield with max blacksmithing skill and all points put into making this shield great. You can see I can easily make a rank 4. Now there are also lots of factors missing here, like the materials used, the ranks, that's not really working right now. There are tools that don't work right now. You can't really see what spark I'm using or if I'm using an enchanted crest and so on and so forth, but don't worry about that for now. The War Within is introducing concentration. I talked about this a little bit before. It's a new mechanic that replaces inspiration, so you also want to pretend that it's not there, so just kind of cover that up, alright? By using concentration, you spend a little bit of this resource to guarantee that your next craft will be made at the next highest rank. So in this case, it would go from a rank 4 to a rank 5 using these points. In theory, if I were to try to make a mythic version of this item, of course the recipe difficulty would be that much higher, and this concentration cost would also be higher, as the more skill you need, the more concentration is spent. What this does is remove all the ambiguity of what we need to be a better crafter. There's no RNG risk of failing to make the craft that you want. There's no weirdness of wanting to put points here but not there because inspiration covers the rest. In the War Within, concentration is a pretty easy to understand resource that covers what you lack in skills. Now you're still incentivized to improve your crafting because the less concentration you spend, the more max level crafts you can make in a given period of time, because concentration depletes and it slowly recharges. It's less a question of can I do it? It's more like how many times can I do it? That's where ingenuity comes into play, which is an RNG stat that basically refunds concentration that's spent. The more ingenuity that you have, the more chances you have at continuing to make high-level crafts. There's another specialization in blacksmithing called Ever-Burning Forge, which is basically a way to temporarily buff your ability to craft. It doesn't provide direct skill bonuses, but it does provide ingenuity. So it's cool, but depending on your playstyle, it's not required to make good things. Ingenuity is a stat that career-minded crafters or mass crafters, they're going to care about it. But Joe Casual over there, who will only make like a handful of items in a given day or a week, there's a clear path to success that doesn't involve ingenuity. Long story short, your investment of profession knowledge has been simplified because inspiration is gone, and that reflects across pretty much every profession. I'll do some faster examples now. Let's look at alchemy and say you want to mass produce cooldown potions. In Dragonflight, one had to invest into 8 different specializations that benefited potions between raw skill and inspiration and multi-crafting and resourcefulness for mass crafters. In the War Within though, that requirement is pretty much cut in half. Currently on the alpha, specializations are based on herbs, which make it pretty clear that, okay, investing into this herb will raise my skill with all potions that use that particular herb. Now at the moment on the alpha, it's kind of imbalanced to where potions that use multiple herbs they're kind of triple dipping into the specialization pool, and that's bound to be fixed. But the takeaway is simply, if you want to be good at making certain potions or flasks or whatever, you just need to plug points into the herbs that are used. The other specializations are there for things like mass crafting. The last example I'll go over is jewel crafting. Like let's say you want to make a good haste gem. Coolies, great. In Dragonflight, it took like 5 different specs to invest into, but in the War Within, that's been consolidated into 3 specializations under one tree. Your specializations will be focused entirely into gem cutting, and then down to your desired cut as shown here, and that's it. The rest is managed by your materials and your tools. Also notice that the reagent gems don't have a rank on them, so it's a little bit easier on your inventory. On the other side of it, it's going to be prospectors that aren't looking to up the quality of the raw gems that they get, but more like the quantity. I'm doing a little speculating here, but I think that stats like resourcefulness, multi-craft, while they're still on the spec trees, a portion of that power is being shifted over to profession equipment, which has much higher stats than Dragonflight ever did, but again, alpha. Despite the overall simplifying of profession specs though, I stand by my desire to see more accessible information to inform us that, yes, we did invest into all of the things that contribute to a particular recipe. There's still time to add useful tooltips and mouse over information to help protect players from making mistakes. Still, with how things are shaping up so far, I feel like I'll be able to make pretty effective build guides to help folks who are interested in whatever profession, with a focus on like this or that thing, basically guides that are easier to grasp than the Dragonflight professions, and I'll be excited to get those out in the coming months. That's going to be the show, and next week's going to be pretty packed even before the remix begins. There's no telling if there will be other drops or promotions, so even my stream schedule is going to be up in the air. Whatever the case though, make sure that you're following me here on YouTube and also on Twitch, so so we can hang together as the remix is underway. Let's give a huge thanks to the family over on Twitch, to our super duper patrons, and to you, viewer. You made it to the end, you fed the algorithm, so like the video if you enjoyed yourself, and I'll see you guys for the next thing. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay breezy.